Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I want to share with you my TBR for 2021. These are 10 of the books that I really want to get to this year. I really enjoy making this video every year because it just helps to focus me on the books that I'm really interested in reading and for one reason or another haven't gotten around to. I do tend to read a lot of the new buzzy releases, and so I find that books that are a little bit older sometimes get shuffled to the bottom of my list. So every year I like to go through my Goodreads TBR and basically look at the books that I'm genuinely really interested in reading, books that I hope will become new favorites. And for the most part, these are books that have been on my TBR for way too long, and sometimes I'm holding off reading them because I feel like they're going to be favorites. And I don't know if you do this, but sometimes I like to save those books for some mystical perfect time. And so these are just 10 books that I really want to get to. There's a mix of genres here, and I think they're pretty representative of the books that I'm enjoying reading these days. So all that being said, let's get started. First, let's talk horror, and I want to read Boy's Life by Robert McCammon. This follows a boy in the 1960s who is out driving with his father when they come across a car that has gone into the icy water. They go to rescue that person only to find out that they are dead. However, this person has been brutally beaten and is naked and is handcuffed to their steering wheel. So this is not just someone who is dead, but someone who was horrifically murdered. Now, this is a coming of age story and a very dark one. And until 2020, I actually didn't think I liked coming of age horror stories, but that all changed when I read December Park and then of course Midnight Rain, both of which made my best of the year list. And so I really want to read more coming of age stories, and quite a few people recommended this one to me because supposedly it's quite dark, as I can kind of tell from the synopsis, and people thought that I would like this one if I liked Midnight Rain because that's another one that definitely deals with the loss of innocence and just what happens to a young boy when they are exposed to a murder way too young. So very excited for this one. It is on the longer side, which does make me more cautious when it comes to horror, but given the subject matter, I definitely am hopeful that it'll become a new favorite. Next, I want to read Demeter by William Peter Blatty, who of course is the author who wrote The Exorcist, which you know I all loved, and so at this point I basically want to read through all of the rest of his work. I don't know a lot about this synopsis. I know it's set in the 1970s in Albania and follows a man who is in prison there named Demeter, and that's pretty much all I need to know. I understand that this one is narrated by the author if I go with the audiobook, which is my plan because I loved his narration for The Exorcist, so I really want to experience that once again. I am a little bit more nervous with this one because looking at the Goodreads rating, it is on the lower side, so I'm going to have to go into it with mild expectations, knowing that it's not going to be as good as The Exorcist, but if it can give me some of those creepy feels, I am all here for that. And like I said, at this point I just want to read everything that he has written, and I'm excited to do that on the sooner side. And speaking of possessions, you probably know that I am obsessed with possession and exorcism horror fiction, and so I'm actually including a nonfiction book on this list, and that is Hostage to the Devil by Malachi Martin. And this is written by an exorcist priest who is telling the story of 5 different people that were exorcised in contemporary America. And while I definitely have mixed thoughts as to modern exorcisms, it's just a topic that really has become top of mind after rereading The Exorcist last year. And so I really want to explore more into nonfiction accounts, and it's just something I'm very much fascinated by. This book has been on and off my TBR for the last several years. It is fairly long, but I'm just really drawn to the topic and just need to try it for myself. And again, I just find those stories absolutely fascinating. So while I don't read a lot of nonfiction, I think this is the kind of nonfiction that will definitely appeal to me. And switching over to thrillers, as I mentioned, I am trying to read more thrillers again on my channel. And so I added a few to my list that are really appealing to me. They've been on my Goodreads TBR for way too long, and I really should get to them because everyone is constantly recommending these books. The first one is Intensity by Dean Koontz. I read one of his books, but everyone tells me that this one is his best. I believe it follows a sociopathic murderer that goes into a house intent on killing everyone, and then I think the story story is told in multiple perspectives, so you also get to hear from a young woman who is trying to survive and get out of this house. And the word that everyone uses to describe this book is, well, intense. And I've heard this book is very scary. I'm a huge fan of home invasion stories, so this definitely sounds right up my alley. And I'm hoping to read this one when I'm in a bit of a slumpy mood, because it just sounds like the kind of book that would just grab you and just make you turn the pages, and it just sounds like the kind of book that is just going to be perfect when I'm in the right mood for it. But again, I'm always saving it for that perfect later time, and hopefully I'll actually get to this one sooner than later, because again, it's been on my TBR for a really long time. I also want to read The Chestnut Man, and this is a translated Scandinavian thriller that follows a serial killer that has a trademark where he basically leaves these little dolls on the victims' bodies, and these dolls are basically made of chestnuts and matchsticks. And I just think that the premise sounds really creepy, and as with most Scandinavian thrillers, this one is supposed to be very dark and gruesome, and I definitely am drawn towards thrillers that are on the darker side, so I've been meaning to read more Scandinavian fiction for quite a while, more translated fiction for that matter, and this one has been on my TBR for quite a while, and I just really think I'm going to connect with it. I've heard great things about it, and yeah, I just got to get to it because it's been way too long. Now, switching over to science fiction, I also want to read Never Let Me Go by Koshiro Ishiguro, and this is one of those books that I believe you're supposed to go into as blind as possible. All I know is that it's a literary science fiction book that is set in a boarding school, and I really don't know much else, and I'm okay with that. I basically want to experience this book for myself. It's never been spoiled for me, so before someone does accidentally tell me too much about it, I really need to read it for myself. I actually enjoy quite a bit of literary fiction. I just don't really talk about it on my channel, and I'm just very hopeful that this will be a new favorite. Obviously a different kind of science fiction book, but yeah, I'm just excited for it, and it's about time I got to it, because again, this is one of these books that's been on my TBR for years and years, and like I said, someone is going to spoil me and then I'm going to have big regrets. Now, I also want to read Dawn by Octavia E. Butler. This follows a woman named Lilith who lost both her husband and son in atomic fires that ended the last Earth in war. Then hundreds of years later, she wakes up to find herself in an alien spaceship. I have been meaning to read more Octavia E. Butler for quite a while. I really enjoyed Kindred as well as Fledgling, and I think this is the next one I want to pick up. I've also heard good things about her Parable of the Sower series, but I just can't read another dystopian like that right now, so I'm hoping that this one will have more of that sci-fi angle with aliens, and I've heard great things about it. I love her writing and her storytelling, and so I'm definitely hopeful that this one might be a new favorite. Now, I also want to read A Memory Called Empire by Arcady Martine, which is set in a future where we follow an ambassador who is taking over for the previous ambassador, and they are able to share memories. So she is given the memories of this previous person. However, those memories are incomplete. While this is science fiction, it also has a mystery angle, and I really like when the two genres cross together. This book is a little bit different than the other books on this TBR because I actually have tried reading this one before, but I put it down. However, I feel like I read it at a really bad time. Basically, the night that I gave birth to my son, because he was premature, I had to say goodbye to him, and I was left alone in the maternity ward while he was being taken care of at the NICU. And so I could not sleep that night. I was up most of the night with all these hormones going through my body, all of that, very distracted as you could imagine. And I tried to read this book, but as you can probably guess, I had a lot of trouble getting into it. But I feel like I had a lot else on my mind that day, so maybe it wasn't the book, maybe it was me. This book has become a BookTube darling. It was the winner of the BookTube SFF Awards, and everyone else seems to love it, so I want to give it a proper try. I understand that it's more cerebral and intellectual and not the most fast-paced book, but my tastes in science fiction have definitely changed over the last few years, so I definitely think that this one could really appeal to the kind of science fiction reader I am now. So I'm going to reread or restart this book and hopefully give it a proper shot this time around. Finally, let's talk about some fantasy. I want to read The Killing Moon by N.K. Jemisin. If you didn't know and missed some of my end of the year videos, I'm a huge fan of her Broken Earth trilogy. And so I'm very interested in reading more by this author. And there's a lot of discussion online about what to read from her next. Most people agree that her Broken Earth trilogy are her strongest books. And so I want to go into her other work with tempered expectations, but after discussing with a lot of people, I decided that I am going to go with The Killing Moon. And this is the first book in a duology, and it's set in a fantastical world that is very similar to Egypt. I love the idea of that setting, and it also involves dream blood magic, which again sounds right up my alley. And so while I don't read tons of fantasy, I definitely think that N.K. Jemisin just brings a really diverse voice to the genre and writes fantasy that just isn't that same classic story that I've read so many times. So I really think that she's going to give me a fresh story here. I've heard mixed things about this one, but from a lot of people I trust and have similar opinions to, they really enjoyed it, so I'm hopeful that I will love it as well. And last but certainly not least, I want to read Black Wolves by Kate Elliott. This is a story set in an Asian-inspired fantasy world where we follow an exiled captain who used to be in charge of an elite group of warriors called the Black Wolves. However, they disbanded after the murder of their king, and now years later he is being called back to basically help with the situation that has transpired. And if again you watch my end of the year videos, you probably know that I am pretty obsessed with Asian inspired fantasy these days. So I want to read anything Asian inspired when it comes to the genre of epic fantasy. And I do want to acknowledge that this one of course is not written by an Asian author herself, but I got a chance to read Kate Elliott's science fiction last year, and so now I'm interested in reading her fantasy. So very hopeful for this one. Unfortunately, it is the start of what was supposed to be a trilogy, but I understand that the other books have not been published and are probably not going to be, which makes me really sad. But that doesn't dissuade me from still wanting to read this book. I am often known for starting series and never finishing them anyways, so I am very eager to jump into this one, and hopefully I will love it as much as I've loved the other Asian-inspired fantasy that I've read over the past few years. So excited for this one as well. I mean, all of these books I'm excited for, obviously. So that is it for this video. Let me know your feedback on any of the books I mentioned here, and also tell me what are the top books that you really want to get to in 2021. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing. I read horror, thrillers, science fiction, and fantasy as I showed you here. And if you're already subscribed, you can help me out by giving this video a thumbs up, hitting that notification bell, sharing it around online, and dropping me a comment. Thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.